Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and I'm here, as always, with my co-host, Clint McPherson. What's up, man?
Not much, brother. Another week in the books, and another week that we're starting off with an awesome guest. And with that said, man, let's go ahead and kick this thing off by welcoming our special guest, Rocky Lalvani, to the show. How you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Clint and Andrew, for having me here. I'm excited to join you and dive deep into the conversation.
And
Absolutely.
Man, don't be afraid there, because I know I probably butchered your last name, but you could definitely correct me.
It's Lalvani, and it's fine.
Lalvani. Okay, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, Rocky, it's great to have you on the show. We're really excited to talk to you today. Before we get into everything, can you just tell our audience who you are and what you're about?
Sure. I'm a dad. I got two kids. They are about to take off for college, the second one. So I'm about to be an empty nester, which is exciting because I've spent the last 20 years of my life coaching them and doing all of that. And I retired from corporate last year. I got tired of all the crap, and I decided to do my own thing, which is Profit Answer Man, which is my podcast. I help business owners make sure that they are wealthy and that they have good cash flow and they're able to survive and thrive.
I love it, man. Rocky, I love the way you started that off. I'm a dad. That resonates with me because I don't think as entrepreneurs, a lot of entrepreneurs start off with what they're actually doing, right? And that's really their focal point. But I have two kids, and I know I have to be better at that, right? Saying, hey, first off, I'm a dad, or hey, I have a family, right? And I think that can get lost in translation. But I really appreciate you saying that, man.
How old are your kids?
A 7-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Okay. So just at the point where the 7-year-old's just at the point where they can start learning money and entrepreneurship and
there you go,
figuring it all out. It's a fun journey. You just have to be intentional with them.
For sure. I love how he's already showed some interest in, asking me questions and because he can see what I'm doing on a regular basis. And now that COVID, he's here all the time. He definitely sees that. But with all that said, man, can you take us back? You just mentioned, a year ago, leaving the corporate world. Can you take us back where your entrepreneurial journey started? Was it then? And then what is it about entrepreneurship that you're actually passionate about, brother?
So my entrepreneurial journey started when I was a kid. When I was in high school, I had a paper route and I was making tons of cash. And I quickly learned the better I served my customers, the more money they would give me in tips. And so that was fun. And then the second thing, I lived outside of New York City in the suburbs. And I used to go into New York City, into the wholesale districts, and buy electronics and bring them back and sell them to my high school friends. So I would double the price and sell the stuff and make money. So I was rolling in the cash. And I kind of did that most of the way through college. But when I got out of college, I think I didn't know how to start a business, so I went and got a job. And the enemy of great is good. So I had a pretty good job with making a lot of money and not working a lot. So I kind of continued down that path. But then probably about 7, 8, 9 years ago, I knew, hey, I've hit most of my financial goals. I'm getting close. What do I really want to do? And how do I want to serve and help and kind of give back in that next stage of life? Plus, I also knew, like, as I talked about, now I'm at the stage where my kids are leaving. So I've got all this free time again. So I got to fill it up with something. And so that's where the whole financial coaching and then finally financial coaching for business owners came about to be. So I was doing a lot of it on the side. We always had a side business, doing accounting and a little bit of bookkeeping. I do tax work, but it's always a balance of family and doing those other things. And I spent more towards the family side than the business side.
Yeah. Is there something what kind of excited you to get involved with coaching you said you kind of set yourself up for financial success, but were you seeing people around you who were having trouble? What motivated you to do that?
So I grew up as an immigrant, and in growing up, we talked about money as a family, and I didn't realize that other people didn't talk about money. I would always be like, why aren't there more millionaires in the United States? We're a country in abundance. There should be more people who have financial success. And I didn't see that. And I couldn't understand why. And probably about that same time, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I read an article about money mindsets. So it's behavioral economics. And I came to realize that most people have these money scripts that were created right about the time your son is between about 5 and 12, right? You probably have those voices in your head. Your mom or dad or somebody in your family said, oh, money doesn't grow on trees. The rich are evil. Like, do the safe thing and get a job. Don't start a business. It's risky. You've got to go back and address those scripts and fix them. And so for me, one of it was understanding what I didn't know. And then I was like, oh, now that I understand what's happened, how do we help people and we fix it? And I just love coaching. When I can open up somebody's eyes and watch them have success, it's a thrilling reward for me. It's not about the money. It's about watching people succeed and thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome, because if you figure out how to kind of unlock financial success, it makes sense that you'd want to, it doesn't necessarily make sense because not everyone would necessarily want to share that, but it's great that you do want to share that. I think that's really cool. And, and you see that, that also shows that you're aware of the interconnectedness of everything and that we're all really, we're all in this together. There's no, all ships rise kind of thing. So, there's no reason to kind of keep people in the dark. And if you can explain to them how to be better at saving and making money at the same time, that's awesome.
I think realizing, like you just said, a lot of families, mine was one of them, don't talk about money enough, right? Don't talk to your kids when they're young, when they can understand it. A lot of the times it's none of your business, or this or that. Turn your head. How much money do you have in your account, Dad? It's none of your business, right? Like, but at the end of the day, that's something that, like, those are important conversations to have. Learning how to save, learning when to spend, learning when to, help. I think, because there's that jar thing that you can set up, right, with your kids at a young age, right? You can have the savings, you can have the spend, and basically like the helping jar, right? Or the one that, hey, this is the only time we dig into this is when you really need it. Basically the savings jar. Okay. And also, but you can also let them know that, this doesn't always have to be used for you. It could be used for good, right? Somebody that has cancer, one of your friends at a young age, to support his cause or her cause, and to let them make that decision and put that decision in their hands, right? I was on a podcast recently where we were saying, he asked me what I would do with my kids, and something that, I'm planning on enforcing is basically taking them to the grocery store. And when it's like fruit or a vegetable or something that I know that we have to get for lunch or dinner or to snack on, it's like giving them a couple of dollars and letting them make that decision on what we actually have, keeping in the parameters of what we will eat, obviously, but also reinforcing them and giving them that ability to spend that money on something that they chose. That goes a long way, man.
It goes a long, long way. So as I said, my kids are now about to turn 18 and 20. They both have Roth IRAs. They both understand financials. Like when we did real estate deals, I would walk them through the properties. I would tell them all the numbers. I would tell them how much money we made. Like they have a good idea of our financial position. And we did that intentionally because what generally happens with immigrant families is the first family comes over and they work really hard. They propel the second generation. And the second generation has a tendency to go, I don't want my kids to work hard like I did. And they spoil them. And then that third generation blows all the money. And so I knew that was the outcome that we would likely face. And so we were very intentional with raising our kids from a very young age, giving them the allowance, putting money in their hands, letting them make those tough choices at the store, and also just a balance of, just because we have money doesn't mean you have money. So, I tell my kids, your dad's rich, you're poor. Figure it out.
Yep. Yeah. It's like, they probably know that, you've got their back, with anything, and that they might not want for anything, but at the same time, having an understanding that, and that differentiation of, because you do hear a lot of kids or younger adults say, my house at the beach, or my this or my that. It's like, well, it's really your parents' this or that, they paid for that. You just happen to live, benefit from it. Yeah, exactly. But when you have a kid who really understands the difference, and they know that they have to go out and earn their own place in the world, that's really powerful.
It is. And my daughter she's done a great job with that. And she understands how to shop, and she understands how to, figure out the value. And she's always, when she's out with her friends, they don't even think about prices. Like, they're not even in tune with the fact that they have to worry about finances, especially with college too. Like, people aren't looking at the price tag of college. They're clueless as to how much they're spending. And it's not good. And I have an MBA. We didn't learn wealth in my MBA. They don't teach you how to make your business profitable. These are skills that we just aren't taught. And so it's not people's fault. And I think that's one message that I like people to know. It's not your fault. We just weren't taught this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we do want to get into some profitability questions too, and your thoughts on that. But first, I just want to talk about efficiency and Parkinson's Law. Can you explain that, and why we sometimes think we're being super productive when we're not, and how do we overcome that so we can be more efficient?
So Parkinson's Law just basically states that whatever amount of a resource is available, we will use it up. So if you tell me that we need to open a new location and we have 6 months to do it, it's probably going to take us 8 months, because there's always problems that go on, right? There's always mistakes that happen. But if I come back to you and say, you know what, we need to open a location and we're going to get it done in 3 weeks, let's go. Most of you are resourceful. You're smart business people. You'll figure out how to get a location up and running in 3 weeks. How is it that we can do it in 3 weeks when we're under pressure? But if we don't put ourselves under pressure and we give ourselves the time, we use it all up. And there's a book called The 12-Week Year. And it's the same thing, right? You think you've got a whole year to hit your goals, you'll take the whole year. But if you've got 12 weeks to do a year, you go faster. So whatever resources you have, you tend to use. And for the kids, it's easy. You got 3 weeks to do, your paper, you'll take 3 weeks. Actually, you don't take 3 weeks. You take one night, 4 hours before, when it's finally due, right? Because that's what we do, right? We procrastinate by our very nature. And so if you understand Parkinson's Law and you put yourself under more stress, in other words, tighter timelines, you'll achieve things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really do agree with that. We are we leverage the power of procrastination like it's nobody's business, right? I remember from being in the military to being in college to being even in high school, and all these times where it was like I wasn't even thinking about doing any of the assignments or anything until that last moment. Like, how long did it take you? It took me 8 hours. Okay, it's going to take me 6. Got it. I'm going to use it, and I'm going to wait for that 6-hour timeline to hit. And now the countdown started. And then it's like you said, it happens. You make it happen no matter what. And if you do know, and I agree, it's like, there's so many things, right? You give that timeline. There's so many things, so many outside forces that leverage it, that you let interfere with the job, or whether it doesn't matter what it is, something's going to happen to make it actually, instead of doing it in 6 months, it takes 8 months, right? And it's one of those things that's going to happen. And I love how it seems like, even though everybody seems like they procrastinate in some form or fashion, that when you give them that timeline, they're able to crank it. So
They are. And the same thing happens with our money, right? Lifestyle inflation. The more we have, the more we spend.
Yes. So as a business owner ourselves, we want to get into this because we all as business owners want financial freedom, right? And that flexibility that stems directly from our businesses. But in most cases, we still might not be sure where to start, right? When it comes to putting that profit first, which you preach, right? And with that said, what advice would you give to us as entrepreneurs or our listeners as business owners? What advice would you give financially that could help put the business owners at ease?
So a couple facts. Number one, and this was a big shocking one to me, 80% of business owners don't look at their financial reports. So they have no idea what's going on and where their money's going. That's a major problem. I understand why. They're not accountants and they don't want to be accountants and bookkeepers. They hate doing that part of it. And I get it. Most business owners, what they do is they look at their bank balance. Can I spend? Can I not spend? And that's the way they do it. The problem is, and you kind of an analogy, right? If you go to a buffet and you have a big plate, you'll fill your big plate up, right? You'll take more than you possibly need. First thing they tell you with diets, get a smaller plate, right? The smaller your plate, the less you eat. It's natural tendencies. So as business owners, if we, instead of looking at this big bank account with all this money in it, thinking we can spend, if we allocate our money appropriately up front, then we can make better decisions. So what I mean is when your revenue comes in, you owe the government, right? You got to pay taxes. Why don't we take a certain percentage out and put it in a separate account for the tax man? Because you're going to have to pay him. And right now, for those of you like July 15th, you got triple whammied on taxes because 3 things came due. And what no one's talking about right now is PPP loan forgiveness is taxable. It's profit. And so next April or whenever you file your taxes, if you haven't allocated for that, you're going to have a wake-up call with a massive, massive tax bill. So take the money aside for taxes and put it aside. You talked about freedom. Who usually gets paid first or last in the business? The business owner always gets paid last. Why? Want to pay yourself first. And so take the money out for your pay up front and set it aside. And when you created your business, you created it to be profitable, didn't you? Right? You had a business plan that showed profit. Well, why don't we just take that profit right off the top before you go crazy and spend it and put it into a separate account and save it? Now what's left is what you can really spend on your business. And that helps you to have a smaller amount to look at in your bank balance, and you're a little bit better at making wiser decisions. I think the big thing I tell business owners is $1 in revenue is not equal to $1 in spending. You might need to go out and get $20 in revenue or $30 in revenue to have one additional spendable dollar, because that's what your profit margin is. And when you're spending from your profit margin, from your bottom line. And so it becomes very important to do that. We talk about changing the equation. So most people talk about sales minus expenses equals profit. That's what we were all taught in business school. That's what your accountants taught. But where is profit? It's a leftover. So Mike Michalowicz wrote the book Profit First. And what he did is change the equation to sales minus profit equals expenses. You always have heard pay yourself first. Nobody does it. That's how I built wealth. Like I built wealth as an employee, just paying myself first. Every time I got money, I immediately sucked money out and set it aside for savings. And it's the same thing for the business owner. As soon as the money comes in, before you're tempted, set it aside. And as we talked about with Parkinson's Law, you guys are resourceful. You're smart. You know how to do this. If you've got less money, you'll figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah. I think that's great because as business owners, we started a business to make money. That's why we started a business. We didn't start a business to grow a business and not make any money. And that's something I've run into firsthand with business is that, so I've got a couple different businesses. One that I own fully that I do it that way, and then another one where it's a product business, thinner margin, but and historically we haven't had enough. We've been really smart, I think, with the way that we've that we've with our expenses, made sure that we don't spend too much and over leverage ourselves and go into debt. So we're debt free, which is great. But we don't think enough, I don't think, about how we compensate ourselves as the owners of that business. And so I think it's, just interesting to make sure that we are compensating ourselves at the end of the day, and that we don't just grow a business forever and never make anything off of it, because
And I see 7-figure businesses that not profitable. They're running in the negative. And they continue to. I mean, it's not unusual. And it's because the business owner goes, oh, I got a 7-figure business. I got $1 million in revenue. I can buy that. No, you can't. You can't buy all that stuff. There's not enough profit in your company to be able to do that. And that's where I think business owners get stuck. Or the other thing that happens is that we hit a storm. And storms are always out there. Right now, everyone is facing a storm together. Some businesses are thriving because they happen to be in a lucky place. Others are, in a bad place. But the people who use profit first, they've got vault accounts. They've got cash built up. And so they can ride through this storm, even in times of trouble.
Right. So what would you say to a startup or any kind of new business they're generating revenue, they're profitable, but they're maybe afraid. They're trying to be smart by not giving by not spending too much and by not taking too much for themselves, kind of like what I was just talking about. What would be your advice to that kind of a business in order, how would you say that they should compensate themselves?
So let me just better understand the question. You're saying that, so they're not pulling money out of the business because they're scared to pull money out of the business? Is that what it is?
They're not compensating themselves, as business owners, because they're afraid, even if they have a few dollars that they could, even if it's a few hundred or a couple thousand that they could potentially pull out, they're just afraid that, that it's too soon, that, they want to keep putting everything back into the business.
Oh yeah. So we're always going to reinvest in our business until something. Well, when is that until? Like, define the until, because otherwise if you're not able to pull money out in the beginning, then you've got a problem. You have a structural financial problem. So tomorrow morning, I'm releasing another episode of Profit Answer Man. I have on Paul. Paul is probably about 7 months into his business. He's taken 2 profit distributions already, right? He's paying himself. His entire business plan was, hey, I do deserve to get paid. And he takes the money. I mean, it's the right way to run a business. You deserve to you're not free labor. I mean, you're not a slave. So why? I know everyone tells you reinvest in your business, you know why they're telling you that? What that means is, give me your money so I can be wealthy.
So right?
Everybody
else,
So everyone else.
Everyone else makes money, yeah.
No one's going to tell you not to spend in your business, because if someone tells you not to spend, where's the profit in that? Where's the margin to the person who says don't spend? I'm going to tell you don't spend. That the number one thing I do for all my clients is we got to cut our spending less, because the less you give to someone else, the more that ends up in your pocket. And that you got to get through your head.
Yeah. I know I struggled with that personally when I first started my digital marketing agency, right? I got it. I was just being, okay, me and my wife were in a good spot financially. I'm going to start my business. This is a great time to do it. Started doing it, right? Took the first year to learn really the ins and outs and the nuances of the business and just educating myself a little more. And I was making money, right? Profitable. And I was generating revenue, had clients, before I even opened my doors for the business to go, I had like a couple clients lined up already, which doesn't always happen. But I would continuously reinvest everything I was earning. I would never take a profit. I would reinvest it in some different type of software to test out all the money that I actually took to invest in the business, right? We had a plan to pay all that back, but I wasn't doing that because the money was rolling in And I was like, I have to get to this. I had in my mind like this imaginary number, like I have to get to this benchmark, right, before I even start drawing any money out. And it just seemed like every time I would get closer, I was my own worst enemy. Like you mentioned earlier, I have the money. Now I'm just going to spend it. And then I was in that mindset, and it was like an endless cycle that I couldn't get out of. And I was like, if I continue this, I remember sitting down with my wife when we were going over my first year of finances and doing the taxes. And she was like, you brought in all of this money. Where is it? And it was like, well, go look at all the things you're about to do the taxes on, right? Like, just go look how much I actually spent, all the software I was buying. We kept going through, what is this? I was like, here's the receipt. What is this? And she's just looking at me like, dude, what is your problem?
Did you need all that? Or
right?
Yeah.
It was like, did you really need to do all of this? And the answer was no, but it felt like I was, again, I didn't know how to run a business when I started, obviously, because that right there, and I'm just pushing it out there in the open airways to say, look, I was that guy that you're mentioning and you're talking about, that I was like, I was clueless, and it took me forever to get out of that cycle, because I was like, I had to actually tell myself, stop, right? Nobody else could tell me to stop but me.
It's not like you're going out and buying fancy cars or something,
no,
or like
Lambos,
crazy stuff,
Right.
But at the same time, it's almost like you're buying fancy stuff for the business, and how much do you need?
And how much of that actually was I using at the end of the day? Because I bought so much stuff, man. I can tell, we can go down a list. Y'all, your eyes would probably pop out of your head, because I'm like, hey, you asked me if I have that software. I probably have it, or you mention it. I'm like, well, I got that. Have I ever used it? No. It just takes too much of my time to learn it, because it's like everybody gets you. We have the shiny object syndrome as business owners, right? They get you with that, oh, this is the easiest thing, you get in it. And there's always that huge learning curve that, like, okay, why was it so easy for them? Because they built it, right? They know how to use it. They don't have to train themselves. And so that was my thing, is like, I got all these products, but probably will never use them.
And that's all money out the door, making someone else wealthy, right? Giving someone else freedom. And we have to, as business owners, I think that's the number one thing we need to do, is to really clamp down on spending and make sure that we don't do it. That's the biggest thing I do for all my business owners, is no spending without approval. Like, you have your standard monthly costs, that's fine. Anything else, we're going to have a conversation. And the conversation is, okay, I want to use this new software. Well, did you go searching out the software, or did the software find you? Were you lured in by an ad, right? Okay, if we put this software in and we spend this kind of money, what's our return? Do you have customers that are already saying they want that service? Oh, you don't know. Well, how about you email 3 customers and ask them, would you want the service that this software provides, and how much will you pay me? Oh, they don't care about that. Gee, maybe I shouldn't buy that, right? Or get a trial version, test it out for 7 days. If at the end of 7 days you haven't used it, move along.
I love that, because it's just one of those things, man. When I'm looking at it, I'm so glad I'm out of that cycle, because that first year I felt so defeated, because I was like, man, I made all this money, and I was like, and I have nothing to show for it at the end of the day. And then so the second and third year, obviously, I was still spending some money, but I was accountable to somebody, right? My wife was like, you got to come to me for approval from now on. Or it was like, you have to have somebody to hold you accountable, because if you're the guy that, again, I'm not, it's the same way in my relationship initially, right? I was, before I married my wife or got together with my wife, I was just spending money because I had money. When I was working, I was like, I was just going to spend it. She's like, why do you have all these DVDs? I was like, I just have them. This is old habits came into the business, right? And it's like, are you going to ever watch all these DVDs? Probably not, but, and so I can start seeing, okay, she actually made me a better person by having somebody, because I was accountable, right? It's like, I can't just go spend all our money. And my wife will probably not be around for much longer if I just did that on a regular basis, right? And so it was almost like I was glad she was in my corner, because she was like, look, you got to at least, hey, let me ask you those questions like you just brought up. Do you need that software, or did that ad find you? Because the ads always find me. It always finds the business.
They always will, yeah.
They always will. It's a fear of missing out. That's the way it is. And that, honestly, that's what I tell a lot of business owners is if you've got a spouse who is good at controlling that, go to them, because for them it's a win-win. They get to control you. They're thrilled telling you no all the time, right?
Right.
They're happy, and it also helps you have better conversations with your spouse, and you guys learn to get along and build things together. And it comes back to family and relationships and being able to do that. And your kids get to watch that too. So they learn not to be consumers. We made sure to teach our kids not to be consumers. And it's a big part of the lessons that they need to learn.
Yeah. I think I initially saw, I don't know if, did you homeschool your daughter?
So for they were private schooled for the majority, but then towards the end, they had said, this isn't working for us anymore. Like, we don't have the ability to learn and to do the things we really want to do. We're getting stuck with work that's useless. And so she created her own plan for her last 2 years of high school. And then she started off for college, at which point we realized, and I guess you forget, college is a business. They don't care about your kid. They care about generating, for most kids, 30, 60, 150,000 to $300,000+. You've got to send your kid to college. And when I saw what the college game was like with my daughter, we totally changed things for my son. So I said, you're going to go get as many college credits on the cheap as you can. And so for his last 2 years of high school, he just essentially went to community college. So at 125 a credit, he was picking up credits. So he graduates high school. He's got about 49 credits towards college. So that's going to cut a year and a half off of college savings. That's a big chunk of money.
Massive. Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah. I've heard Warren Buffett talk about how he would recommend for a lot of people just going to basically that exactly. But more, even if you don't take those community college credits during high school, at least first 2 years of college are on the cheap. Second 2 years transfer to somewhere maybe more well-known, maybe with a better reputation, and that's it. So you save a ton of money, but you can still graduate from a school like the school of your choice. You can still have part of that experience and everything. So yeah, it's really interesting.
You have to be intentional and think about your money in all the different areas. And, everyone else wants your money too, but if you don't put yourself first, no one else will. That's why you have to pay yourself first and take profit first.
And I love how you translated that over to your kids too, though, because I remember seeing the post. We're followers of each other on LinkedIn, and I think you posted that on LinkedIn, and I thought it was very powerful, man. Just seeing that that your kid, your young, I guess your youngest, right? 49 credits already, and that I was like, man, that's the way to go. I mean, that's so huge to have him so far in the game, and that can save so much money. And then for your daughter, right, for her to be interested, it was your daughter, right, that's interested and helps you with your podcast. Yeah. And I saw that, and it was just so powerful, the words that you spoke in that post. And I was like, man, this is kind of cool, because he's bringing it full circle. He's looking out for his kids. And I think as parents, we have so much commotion going on, right? If you're in the corporate world, you're working that grind and you're trying that 9 to 5, and you're just stuck in that cycle. You're not teaching your kids about money. But I really think it's just a perfect example of what you did with your kids, right? Teaching them about money, and then actually taking the ball back into your own court once you realized, whether it was the last 2 years or earlier, that, you can have some leeway with that and actually give them and yourself that freedom of choice, so they can make that decision, and you can make that decision as a family to better their position going forward, man. And that's huge.
It is. And so knowing what I know now, I would have taken a further step. If I had a business from the time my kids were 5 or 6, I would have them working in my business, and I would be teaching them all the business principles. And when they got older, I think I'd almost force them to do real estate. Like, we're going to go buy a house together and you're going to learn how to do all of this stuff so you have real world skills. Because the reality is if you do all of that, they can skip college. There's no reason to necessarily think of it this way. If you said to your kid, I'm going to give you $150,000 to start a business. You're 18. Let's roll. I mean, think of how far they could go and what they could do if instead of handing it over to the college, you handed it to your kid. Now, of course, you've got to train your kid. If you start at 6, they've got 12 years of good training of how to make wise decisions over those times. My friend Jonathan Harris is launching his new site. It's called Parent Their Passion. So he has 9 kids. They aren't going to college. They're all learning at a young age how to do different parts of business based on what their passions are. So one of them's a coder, building websites. One of his kids loves audio engineering. He's been editing my podcast since he was 11 years old. Right. So he's learning a skill and doing this stuff. One of his other kids is a bladesmith. He learned how to make high-end knives. So they're teaching their kids, they're taking a different path. And a lot of the kids work in their business. And so if you have that flexibility as a business owner, not only does it build a wonderful relationship with your kids, you get kids who are strong and they can just go launch in life. Stop following everybody else's path.
Yeah. And having that experience is, I mean, the single best thing I think I did in college was to do a co-op, like an internship throughout college. And it was the best thing because I honestly think that a lot of people, when I went on interviews, they looked at my resume. They looked at that co-op and they all asked me a ton of questions about that. I didn't care about the classes I took. I mean, it was all engineering stuff and, it was kind of technical and I was applying for engineering jobs, but they didn't even care as much about that for the most part. They cared about my experience. And, a couple of years out of college, nobody cares about what you did in college. They all care about the experience anyway. So if you can get that experience in college or even sooner, you're going to. Sooner. Right.
So yeah. my kid is, I coached robotics. He builds robots all the time. We hooked up with a local engineering company as part of robotics, and they got to help him with design issues with the robot. And they also have laser cutters and CNC machines and all. And he would go there and they would help him and learn. And because of that, last summer, they said, hey, would you like to intern here? So he's going into college now with 2 years of internship under his belt. This year last year for the internship, they said, figure out how the CNC machine works, teach us how to do all the stuff and start building parts for us. This year, they wanted him to build a robotic lawnmower. So he spent his whole summer working on that project, figuring stuff out. Like, how do we build this? How do we learn? How do we do these things? So those are the skills, like you said, Andrew, when he goes on a job application, this is what I did. This is how I solve problems. This is what I do. His idea of shopping is going to McMaster Parts and buying.
Oh, I know all about McMaster.
That's his, literally, that's his passion. He spends tons of time and money on there buying all kinds of crazy stuff to build robots.
That's so cool. That'll definitely serve him well. And it's just, that's what really gets employer. If you are looking to get a job, that's what gets employers excited, which it should. I mean, and if it doesn't, you're not interviewing at the right places, right? You're not, you really probably don't want that job if they're not excited about that experience. But then, if you want to go your own route, you've got to jump on it for sure. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, man. So Rocky, through your entrepreneurial journey, man, I know it's obviously, and everything you've been through from your podcast and from the highs into the lows that you've experienced in your life, what has been the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur?
Starting. It is harder to go from 0 to 1 than it is to go from 1 to 100. Right. I do real estate. Now, when I was a kid, I always did the work around the house. So I knew how to do all the work on real estate. I knew how to do roofing, plumbing, electrical, studying stuff out. When I was in high school, I sold real estate. I didn't buy my first rental property until I was, I think, into my 40s. Like I just didn't start, right? Once I got the rental properties, then we started flipping houses, and all of a sudden this business is doing well. Had I done that 30 years ago, it would have been phenomenal. My skill set naturally is with Excel. So when I was in high school, I was going into Fortune 500 companies teaching accountants how to go from paper ledgers to electronic spreadsheets. Had I gone and started a business creating Excel sheets and data mining, I'd be a billionaire. Like, but you don't always know that going forward. And if you don't start, you can't do it. So I think the biggest thing is to start and then just keep taking the steps. And I don't tell people to jump and build it on the way down, right? I say jump with a parachute. Make an appropriate choice. If you're in a job, build something on the side that can work with you. Or if you're an entrepreneur, spend the time to look around and be silent and see where opportunities are. See where one of the biggest things that I do, especially for my clients, is we examine their business and we see where it's making the most money. And then we start to focus our time and effort to the areas in our business that make the most money, instead of the ones that suck up 80% of the time and provide hardly any return for our business. So it's just that focused, I think. Take the time to think. They say work on your business, not in your business. And so I think for entrepreneurs, get started and then pause and think.
Sure. What do you think are the, maybe one or two biggest ways that we can improve the bottom line of our business? What's maybe the most common thing that you see that, can kind of get owners out of their own way and just improve the bottom line without a ton of effort?
So go into your bank account and your credit statements, right? Just put it all in an Excel sheet and then sort it by vendor. So now you've got this whole long spreadsheet, and just go line by line and say, is this something that drives revenue into my business and makes me profitable? Is this something that I need, but I can figure out a way to do for cheaper? And 3, is this a vanity product that I have that I bought or that serves zero purpose in my business? Just start canceling all the vanity, all the stuff that you buy that's of no use. Start canceling all those memberships, monthly fees, whatever it is. A lot of times we sign up for stuff and we forget about it, right? Just go through, get rid of all your spending. And then for the spending that you need, figure out ways to cut costs. Get one of your employees to call the cable company and the insurance company and this company. What can we do to reduce our bill? I've got I know if a couple of my customers have been able to, they're spending on a service X, but the return that they're getting from doing that isn't worth what they're spending. And I'm like, there's ways to do that for 10 cents on the dollar. And so then they go evaluate, and instead of spending all this money on it, they spend a fraction of the money. And they get most of the benefit, but it wasn't a big part of the business anyway. So why spend all of that on services? Or they'll drop their software down. Like, they'll go from a high level service to the bottom tier. That stuff starts adding up very, very quickly.
Yeah, no, I would agree. All I heard through that whole, through your explanation there is not to be like me. What I did my first year in business, it's like, don't be that guy that chases a shiny object and just spends money. Make sure, I'm telling you, I was that guy. I was signing up for the work, like the monthly things, right? You get the free trial. There's free trials out there, which I love that you don't have to insert your credit card. So if you forget about it or don't use it, you're not getting dinged right off the bat, right? So look for those if you can. But man, don't be that guy that falls for that 14 free day trial or that 2-week trial, and you don't follow up with that because you can lose so much money that way.
So there's two ways that I deal with that. One thing you can do is call your credit card company up and say, hey, can you send me a new card? And they'll close the old card. So all the companies are now going to have to call you and say, hey, do you want to re-up this? And that forces you to decide. The second thing, I use virtual cards from Citibank. And so every time I make a transaction online, I create a brand new credit card for it. Even for stuff that I pay once a year, I create a brand new credit card each time to pay the software fee. When the year comes up, they can't bill the card, right? And so they send me emails going, hey, you need to update your payment. And I go, yes, I want to pay this, or no, I don't. And so it forces that to happen.
That's a great point because, yeah. It's a good way to just kind of, I mean, with even less effort than going after and actually looking through your credit card statement. You just cancel your card, and that's one action. And I mean, that's great because normally the only time, I have been getting a little better about it. I got to be honest. I have been kind of going after and figuring out what I still pay a monthly fee on, and making sure that it's something that I absolutely need. But but a lot of times, I'll only do that, or at least thoroughly do that when I have a cancel a credit card or credit card expires or something. Then you kind of go in and you go through line by line. I use Wells Fargo, and they actually have a nice, I think it's called Control Tower or something, where you can go through and go, just really quickly see everything you're spending money on. And it's like sometimes you're kind of amazed at what you're still spending. Might be $4 a month, but after a few years, yeah. So I love that. Well, Rocky, I think we could talk to you for hours here. Really enjoyed this, but as we wrap up the episode, you've just told us a couple of great pieces of advice, but what's another really good piece of advice that you could share with our listeners to give that, to help them on their entrepreneurial journey?
So I'll give you one piece of actionable advice that's easy to do and won't hurt. Go create a new account at your bank and label it profit. And at the end of the month, look at how much revenue came in and just take 1% of it and put it in the profit account, and do that every month. And in 3 months, up it to 2%. And then just keep doing that until the business hurts. Right?
Okay. And then you figured out where your limit is. Is that what you're saying?
Then you're figuring out where your limit is. But at that point, then you're forced to make those decisions of the $4 a month here and the this and the that. But in the meantime, you're building a habit of taking profit, setting it aside, and you'd be shocked at how, when you start to see that account build up, you're going to start to get excited, right? It's like when you start to lose weight. When you start to lose weight, you get excited, right? And you want to lose more weight. When you start to see that profit account build up, you're going to get excited. And you're going to want to go gamify it and find ways to cut costs so you can up your profit.
That's very cool. And again, something that takes very little effort, and you don't have to think too hard about that. You don't have to crunch every number down to the penny. You just do something very simple, 1% a month, and just up that until you sort of reach the point where it feels a little painful. And you're like, okay, there's my limit. Maybe back it off a couple percent, and there you go.
Or challenge yourself. Why am I spending this money? And hold to it. And everything I just gave you is free, right? It doesn't cost you a penny to implement. No software fees. No, make sure your bank doesn't charge you for accounts. If they do, it's time to find a new bank.
I love Rocky. Well, guys, I think that's a wrap for this episode, Rocky, from the both of us, man. We want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to help us and adding value to what we're trying to do on our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast to get to chat with you both.
It really was. Yeah. Thanks, Rocky. Guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Rocky is working on, check out profitcomesfirst.com. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or on any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
And with that said, guys, we also want to quickly give a special shout out to our family and friends, like always, to include our followers, our listeners, and subscribers. If you find value in what we're doing on our show, please consider making a small donation, because even just a few dollars goes a long way and help us keep things moving along and brings value to your entrepreneurial journey. Thanks for continuing to support what we do as entrepreneurs, guys. And don't forget to join us next week for another episode of That Entrepreneur Life.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.